Welcome to Deerhound Productions. My name is DaneCat33, and today we'll be covering the Five Nights at Freddy's CPU timeline. If you're unfamiliar, the term CPU refers to the Candies and Popgoes universe. This is the shared universe that 2 out of the 3 ongoing Fazbear Fanverse Initiative series take place in, those being Five Nights at Candies, or FNaC for short, and Popgoes. The CPU only takes information presented in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 through 3 into account, so anything that was revealed or introduced from that point onward, such as the purple guy being William Afton or all the future characters and establishments, doesn't apply to this universe. Our timeline begins in the mid-1950s when Mary Schmidt is born. Mary also has a brother. It's not clear if he's younger or older than her, but it doesn't really matter. When Mary is young, she and her mother make an origami cat out of blue paper. However, sadly, her mom eventually passes away. This leads Mary to view the origami cat as a sentimental item, a reminder of the time that she and her mom spent together. Her mother's death might also be the start of Mary's sleeping troubles, though thankfully, her dad makes her a quiet, calming song for her to listen to on a tape player, and the tune helps her sleep. On the week of October 9th, 1961, her father takes her to the Rat and Cat Theater while her brother's at a summer camp, and these events are detailed during the Five Nights at Candy's 3 minigames. The theater has 3 performers. Of course, there are the Rat and the Cat, along with the puppeteer and his marionette, Vinny. According to newspaper clippings found in the game, the puppeteer actually co-founded the theater. Before the shows, the mascots walk around the establishment and interact with guests, playing games such as hide and seek to pass the time. Although they're relatively friendly, a kid remarks that one time, the rat got angry after he asked for more modern arcade games. Back to Mary, she becomes fond of the mascots, playing hide and seek with them every day. The week goes smoothly, but on the 5th day, when she returns to play hide and seek, every kid in the building is trying to play with the rat, so he decides just to have one big game of hide and seek with everybody. All the kids scatter, taking up every hiding spot before Mary can get to them. As she's searching for an empty spot, the cat walks out of an employees only room, leaving the door ajar. With nowhere else to hide, she enters the room. Inside, she finds noteworthy items such as a diploma, a large metal locker, and a script on a table which reveals the cat's name to be Candy. On another table rests the Vinny marionette, and on the final one sits a telephone. After snooping around the room, Mary decides to hide in the metal locker. Not long after, the rat enters and starts looking for her. The puppeteer runs to him and tells Rat that he can't show up at the theater in his current condition. Rat assures him that he only had a couple of drinks, but the puppeteer sees past that, telling him how his drunkenness could get them in career-ending trouble. The rat boasts to the puppeteer that the kids love him. He's just jealous that he isn't the star of the show. The puppeteer tells the rat to take off his costume and go home, but he angrily declines, leading to the puppeteer trying to take off the mascot's head. The rat then yells at him to cut it out and begins choking the puppeteer, who then shoves the rat, making him stumble backwards and hit his head on a table. Blood then begins seeping out of the costume. At first, the puppeteer can't believe it, but then reality hits, and at the worst possible time, the cat walks in. The puppeteer commands him to lock the door, then explains that what happened was an accident. However, unbeknownst to either of them, the rat isn't actually dead. As explained by an expert in a newspaper article, he was paralyzed when he hit his head on the table, but he could still see and hear everything. The cat tells the puppeteer they should call the police, but he insists they should claim they found the rat like this. The cat believes they should tell the truth, and he goes to dial 911. During his attempt to call the police, the puppeteer ruthlessly kills the cat by choking him with the rim of his costume head. Once the cat goes limp, the puppeteer lets his body fall into a sitting position on the wall. He takes a look at his degree and decides to call the police, telling them that he heard a rustling and found both of his co-workers dead. After hanging up the call, he takes his diploma, leaving the rat to bleed to death and a traumatized Mary to make her way out of the crime scene. Despite none of that being her fault, she still feels guilty for the events that transpired. Did you know that people with guilty consciences are more easily startled by loud noises? After this tragedy, the theater closes its doors and Mary represses her memory of the incident, leaving only her fear. The puppeteer eventually finds fame in acting, taking the role of a villain in a movie called Psychopath. His performance in the film is so good that it leaves many wondering how he played a murderer so well. Guess we'll never know. Around this time, it's speculated that Mary moves into a new house. This information will be important later on, so keep it in mind. In the following year, 1962, the Robotics Corporation is founded. This robotics company creates, well, robots. And in their founding year, they produce wire animatronics of the famous rat and cat for a brand new theater. unlike most animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's, these are controlled by an employee using the wire system attached to the endoskeleton. The animatronics are created using the suits from the original theater, so of course, they're possessed by the ghosts of the ghosts of the murdered actors. While this is never outright confirmed, it's pretty obvious that the costumes were used for the animatronic puppets, given that the rat costume is almost identical to the wire puppet, and there's no other explanation for how their spirits possess the animatronics. The CPU has pretty specific rules for how ghosts come to be, and these are established in Popgoes Arcade. In that RPG, King Freddy's father researched the supernatural, and his son writes the following about him. He was adamant that creatures who were killed by the hands of another creature would get a second chance at living, as a specter or a ghost, something like that. He said dying naturally would end the cycle. You turn into nothing, disappear. But being killed by someone else, on purpose, the world, nature, karma, it would give you another chance. So since the rat and cat were murdered by the puppeteer, they're given a second chance at life and become ghosts who haunt the costumes they died in. During the theater's grand reopening, Mary's family visits, and Mary is clearly traumatized. She begins crying upon entering the main room where the rat and cat are performing. Her brother is unfazed and runs up to the rat. Suddenly, the animatronic bends down and grabs the child's hair, refusing to let go. Though luckily this isn't fatal, it is terrible enough to get the theater shut down for good, and the employee controlling the rat was arrested, though it wasn't his fault. It seems like the ghost of the former rat actor intentionally attacked Mary's brother. After the theater's closure, the animatronics are sent back to the robotics factory to be used as a base for newer, fully mobile designs. Five Nights at Candy's 3 takes place 2 weeks after Mary's brother was injured. Mary's having trouble sleeping due to recurring nightmares about the rat and cat. At a meeting with her therapist, they tell Mary that her brother's okay, and that the animatronics were just malfunctioning, assuring her that they can't hurt anybody. I'm sure that'll age well. The therapist then inquires about Mary's nightmares. They pull out a picture she had drawn, and ask her if the night terrors involve the terrifying rat and cat on the page. They then tell her that she can't let the monsters take control of her imagination, and that she must face her fears head-on to get rid of them and remember what happened at the theater a year ago. After the session, when Mary's back home and asleep in her bed, she enters a place in her mind called the Dreamscape. This place takes the form of her old bedroom layout, and here, the origami cat she made with her mother speaks to her. It has a very patient and helpful personality, and it tells Mary to go into a deeper part of the Dreamscape called the Deepscape. Here she can find a tape player that she used in the past to help her sleep. The Deepscape is a massive area where Mary's deepest memories reside, along with one giant shadowy rat and a cat duo, who are implied to be the ghosts of the dead theater actors. More on that later. During the game, you can find pieces of newspapers, which is where a lot of the information for this early part of the timeline comes from. There are also some of Mary's oldest toys, which, much like the origami cat, can also speak to her. After finding the cassette tape player, she returns to the Dreamscape and heads to bed, which is where the night segments of the game begin. During these terrifying dreams, Mary sits on her bed, armed with a flashlight to ward off the monster rat and cat. Located behind her is the tape player she collected in the Deepscape, and in front of her is a door, a cabinet, and her closet. As the night progresses, the monster rat can show up at any of these 3 locations. If he's not blinded by Mary's light, he will get inside the room, and Mary will have to keep her light on his eyes. If she manages to do this, then Monster Rat will hide under her bed. From there, Mary has to look down, find out which side of the bed he's under, then wait for him to peek his head up and blind him, sending him away for the time being. For 6 hours every night, Mary has to repeat this and keep the tape playing to make the nightmare end faster. As the nights go on, the monster cat starts to appear in her nightmares too. He'll crawl up Mary's bed, his breathing getting louder as he gets closer. If she doesn't scare him off with her flashlight, he'll take Mary's tape player and jump scare her the next time she looks under the bed. Along with this, the Deepscape and Dreamscape change, and her old room starts to gain furniture as she remembers more and more. After the 5th night of facing her nightmares, she finally defeats them, allowing her to remember what she had witnessed on the day of the incident. Following this, on December 7th, 1962, Mary tells her therapist about her restored memories of the incident, almost clearing her of the guilt she once had. Mary's therapist then asks Miss Sherwood, who seems to be either a receptionist or assistant, to contact the authorities to get Mary's statement. Following this, the puppeteer is taken into custody and thrown in jail. This brings Mary a new guilt, the guilt of ruining the puppeteer's life. Later, in what can be reasonably assumed as the Dreamscape, Mary confronts the puppeteer, who's represented by his previously mentioned puppet, Vinny. I don't think this is literally the puppeteer, given that as far as we're aware he's still alive, and unlike the ghosts of the rat and cat actors, he's not a shadow. So Vinny seems to just represent Mary's guilt. At the start of the game, he even blamed her for the theater incident. Later in FNaC 1, we also see more of him being used as a general representation of Mary's guilt. In the present, he symbolizes her remorse for helping convict the puppeteer. Vinny tells her that before his imprisonment, he had everything, and for his revenge, he will never let her sleep again. The puppet's appearance changes. His eye sockets widen and his mouth becomes filled with sharp, bloody teeth. Mary then finds herself in her old bedroom once more as Monster Vinny attacks. His quick movements, crazy ability to avoid the flashlight, and overall aggressiveness make this the toughest nightmare yet. Though by sheer skill, Mary manages to survive till 6 AM and beat the nightmares once and for all. As of June 14th, 1963, Mary no longer fears the rat or cat. She's now much more energetic and creative. The game concludes with the therapist's confidence that their next meeting will be their last. Of course, our story is far from over. In the following year, 1964, a company known as CTC Entertainment emerges. It's unclear whether this is a rebranded version of the company that owned the Rat and Cat Theater, or an entirely new company that formed and purchased the theater's rights. Regardless, it seems like Rat was dropped from the public image after he attacked Mary's brother. Now Candy's the star, hence the name CTC Entertainment, which likely stands for Candy the Cat Entertainment. The company then commissions 2 entirely new performers from robotics. One is an updated version of Candy, and a new character named Blank. Blank is a fully mobile, walking whiteboard coated in a waxy substance that allows anyone to draw on him. And this new Candy is pretty much just blue and upgraded. Anyways, on November 13th at midnight, which just so happens to be a Friday the 13th, the new Animatronics and the Rat are sitting motionless on a conveyor belt. The Rat then stands up on his own and walks out of view before returning to break the security camera. He then presumably kills 2 employees at the factory, who then haunt Candy and Blank. Now, you might be wondering why Rat has taken on such a villainous role, and honestly, so are we. Ghosts in the CPU are all over the place. Spirits seen in the Popgoes games seem to be simply confused and can calm down, while the souls haunting the animatronics in FNAF and FNaC are typically more aggressive. However, none of these specters come close to the Rat and Cat. Those guys are rotten to the core. As we'll see in Five Nights at Candy's 2, they very much enjoy their crimes, and are much more violent than the other Candy's characters. Some people think the Rat is so evil because he was drunk when he died, so now he's eternally drunk and angry. But the Cat, who was sober, is also hostile, so that doesn't seem to be the case. But on the topic of the Rat being a drunk, he might just be evil because he was kind of a crummy guy. As we discussed earlier, he showed up to work intoxicated, yelled at kids, attacked his coworker, and he was generally depicted as very egotistical, boasting about how he was the most popular character of the theater, while on the other hand, the Cat and Puppeteer kinda just treated it like work. So his evil behavior might simply be because he sucks, and that could have rubbed off on the Cat. Something more definitive is that their spirits must be pretty powerful. According to FNaC creator Emil Mako, unlike the normal animatronics, the wire puppets have nothing electrical in them. So the fact that Rat, and by extension the Cat, can move around must mean they're pretty strong. Oh, and while we're diving to the Rat's character, unlike the Cat, we never learn his actual name. However, it's very likely Randy, as in FNaC 3, a kid mentions that maybe the Rat and Cat's real names rhyme. In that case, Randy and Candy would make a lot of sense, but again, nothing is ever confirmed. Later in 1964, Candy's Burgers and Fries opens its doors with the brand new Candy and Blank animatronics as its stars. The Rat is brought to the restaurant too, but he's locked away in storage. The Rat being separated from the Cat causes a shadow version of Candy to form at the restaurant, allowing the two to stay close to each other. Emil Mako has confirmed that Shadow Candy is an evolved version of the Shadow Cat, implying this appearance in Mary's Deepscape is the cat actor's ghost haunting her. However, some people believe that the shadows in FNaC 3 are just part of Mary's trauma. But I have no clue why they'd be shadows if they weren't the Rat and Cat spirits, given that they manifest as shadows. Also, Emil specifically mentioned that Shadow Cat evolved into Shadow Candy, and this is the only shadow version of the cat we see. However, that doesn't mean it's the only one that exists, but then why not show us the other one? Who knows? Still, I'm inclined to believe that these are the Rat and Cat's ghosts tormenting Mary. As to why these spirits would haunt her, maybe they blame her for their deaths. After all, Rat only entered the employee's only room to find Mary, and that led to his and the cat actor's demise. They likely gave up tormenting her after she stopped visiting the Deepscape, so they returned to their bodies. This shadowy connection between the Rat and Cat really makes you think about their relationship. Are they just really good friends, or something more? Anyway, a year later in 1965, Candy sees Shadow Candy, who leads them to the parts and service room where someone is working. Candy accidentally scares them and gets tased by the frightened employee. Also note the red and blue mugs on the office table. 11 years later, in 1976, Blank walks around the restaurant picking up scattered drawings. When collecting one that depicts shadow candy, the cat suddenly appears in front of him. The point of having shadow candy messing with Blank and candy is never really made clear, but it seems like the rat and cat are out to get the animatronics, likely to prevent them from getting revenge. We'll see more of them being hostile towards other bots later on. And again, make sure to note the red and blue mugs, now farther apart. Growing distant, perhaps? Sometime in either the 70s or 80s, the year is currently unclear, Fredbear's Family Diner opens for business. Its two stars, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, are a golden duo of musical animals. Fredbear is a yellow-furred bear wearing a brown top hat and bow tie. And Spring Bonnie is a similarly golden rabbit with only a black button near the top of their stomach. I know that in most of the FNAF games, books, and movies, these animals have purple accessories, but those were only introduced in FNAF 4, which isn't canon in the CPU. So these guys are stuck with their FNAF 3 look. What these two continuities do have in common is that Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are a special kind of animatronic/suit hybrid. Employees can use a hand crank to recoil and compress the animatronic parts around the sides of the suit. Devices known as spring locks keep those parts fastened tight. This lets performers wear the animatronics. Unfortunately for the person inside, the suit is very sensitive. Breathing on the compressed spring locks could accidentally loosen them, mashing the animatronic metal endoskeleton straight into the performers, causing almost certain death. Luckily for them, there's the safe room, a designated location for employees to bleed out in the event of a spring lock failure. Later on in the 80s, Fredbear's Family Diner shut down for an unknown reason, which leads to the creation of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a similar restaurant with a whole new cast of characters. Rather than having Fredbear and Spring Bonnie reprise their roles on stage, 4 completely new animatronics take their place. Those being the brown-haired bear singer, Freddy Fazbear, the blue-haired purple fuzzy guitarist, Bonnie the Bunny, and the hungry backup singer, Chica, who has a little pink frosted companion, Mr. Cupcake. Cast away on Pirate's Cove is the pirate Foxy, and finally, the last character here is none other than the spooky sock puppet, the Marionette, who may or may have not been a character from Fredbear's. Unfortunately for the rest of Fredbear and friends, they're taken to the safe room and left to rot. However, the Spring Bonnie suit would soon be reused by a terrible man named Simon Fitzgerald, the twin brother of Jeremy Fitzgerald, who is a key character in the CPU. Anyways, Simon is the identity of the Purple Man in this universe. And unlike William Afton, we don't know much about his motives, but we'll discuss some possibilities later on. Simon starts his streak of murders with a young boy trapped outside of Freddy's, as seen in the Take Cake to the Children minigame. He drives up to the entrance of Freddy's, takes the boy's life, and escapes in his car. The soul of this dead child haunts the Marionette. And before I get any angry comments, in the CPU, the Marionette is a boy. In the movie and mainline universe, they're possessed by Charlotte Emily. However, she was only introduced to the games in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, which isn't canon in this universe. Sometime around this tragedy, Foxy goes out of order. And as we learn from the newspaper clippings in FNAF 1, on the week of June 26th, Simon wears the Spring Bonnie suit and lures 5 children into the safe room in groups. He murders them all and hides their corpses in the animatronics. The Marionette then helps their souls possess the mascots they've been stuffed into, giving life to Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the ghostly Golden Freddy. Once the children are reported missing, the police search Freddy's and find security footage of Simon luring the kids. But with no concrete evidence or bodies, Simon gets away, and the children's remains are never found. After this, the safe room is sealed off, but the Spring Bonnie suit is taken. However, the fate of Fredbear is left unclear. Maybe he was moved? I don't know, he's just not in the safe room the next time we see it. On the topic of confusing stuff, let's discuss Simon's motives. In POPGOES 2016, he was a man who killed not for pleasure, but to extend his life, which he believed was possible with the blood of younger people. This might still be the case in the modern lore, however, it's not exactly clear. Dane from the future here, ignore all of that. His motives seem to be the same in the present story. Right after we finished this video, there was a new POPGOES Evergreen teaser named Death is an Animal, in which we hear a very spooky voice discuss how death is like a wolf that hunts humanity and robs of its true potential. After the voice's own experience with death, they want to break this system, making death choose more carefully who perishes and also have it regret who it's taken, turning it from a wolf to a good dog. This voice is pretty obviously Simon Fitzgerald, given how it matches up with his 2016 goal of immortality. POPGOES creator Kane Carter also hearted a comment saying it was him, so yeah, it's pretty obvious. In the video, Simon also mentions that all of this stems from when he experienced loss. so it seems like someone close to him died, making him desire a way to command death. In Popgoes Arcade, Simon is seemingly represented by King Freddy, and interestingly enough, the passing of his father sparked his interest in making everyone immortal. Similar to how this unknown loss in Simon's life made him interested in controlling death. So it's possible that Simon and Jeremy's father passed away. More on King Freddy and Popgoes Arcade in like an hour. The teaser also features a table with a microscope, bandages, and a bloody looking rag, suggesting that Simon is still trying to cheat death with blood. The text throughout the video also gets progressively bloodier, further implying this. When Simon calls death a good dog, we see a much more decayed, withered Freddy, hinting that Simon is aware of, or later becomes aware of, the supernatural, and possibly wants to use it as a way to control death. However, he could just be collecting blood samples from the possessed animatronics for further research. In a cancelled game known as Popgoes Finale, one of the levels involved an older Jeremy exploring Simon's bunker, where he hid and also kept clues and photos regarding his victims. I think what we're seeing here is a similar concept. The house in this teaser appears to be abandoned, and we can see evidence of Simon's experiments. So it seems that in Evergreen, we'll likely see Simon's lair and learn more about his research. Okay, that's out of the way. Let's return to the present before Blake and I realized we had to redo all of this. But back to the CPU timeline, after Simon's victims are stuffed into the animatronics, Freddy and the band start to leak blood and mucus out of their eyes and mouths. Due to health concerns, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closes. Following that, Fazbear Entertainment retrofits the band with newer technology, but ends up scrapping them due to how ugly and smelly they are. Then, in a stroke of genius, they make the best version of all the Freddy's animatronics, the toys. This shiny plastic bunch of robotic animals consists of Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, and Toy Foxy. In the mainline universe, the toy version of Foxy is referred to as Funtime Foxy. No, not that Funtime Foxy. However, since the CPU doesn't take anything past 3 into account, I assume the Funtime name doesn't stick. What does stay, however, is everyone's favorite toy animatronic, Bloom Boy. All of these animatronics are programmed with a criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away. In late 1987, the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is opened, and the older, now withered animatronics are left in the parts and service room. Luckily for the marionette, he's put in the prize corner. Sometime after opening, Toy Foxy is torn apart by the world's strongest children and ends up repurposed as a failed take-apart and put back together attraction. Sadly, Fazbear Entertainment can't seem to get away from Simon, who kills 5 more children as shown by the Save Them minigame. The victims then end up possessing the toy animatronics, who begin acting almost aggressively towards adults. Mary, now an adult herself, visits the pizzeria on a busy day. So busy, in fact, that large groups of children are blocking the doorways to parts of the pizzeria. Mary wanders over to the prize corner and sees the marionette performing a fantastic dance. The dancing puppet resurrects her past trauma, as its design reminds her of Vinny. This makes her mind merge the two into one. The puppet's wide smile morphs into an eerie frown, and its red cheeks and lipstick turn blue. Later in the year, Mary gets a job as a security guard at the Robotics Corporation factory, possibly as an attempt to clear her resurfaced trauma. Let's take a detour back to Candy's Burgers and Fries, where Candy sees Shadow Candy and follows him through the restaurant. The ghostly cat leads the normal cat to the office, where our favorite red mug is now lonely with the blue mug nowhere to be seen. Also, there's a crying child in the office. When he's approached by Candy, he runs out of the room, cheerful that he got a visit from the old blue cat. Candy walks out of the office and follows Shadow Candy once more, who leads him to the kid and his father, who is scolding the child. In response, Candy attacks the mean old dad, and following this, he's swiftly put out of commission, leaving Blank to be the main performer until new animatronics are created. Back at the factory, on September 22nd, 1987, while Mary's watching the cameras, she sees a hallucination of Vinny, who is sticking with his Freddy's-inspired look. He stands in the dark, staring at the camera. Mary turns it away, but when she moves it back, he's closer. When she turns it once again, Vinny, now with white, spooky glowing eyes, stares at her. And the feed cuts. The next night, while watching the cameras, Mary falls asleep, leading to what is quite possibly the worst thing to happen while falling asleep at your job. 2 unattended children somehow sneak into the factory, where Candy's 3 minigame shows us that the cat and Shadow Rat are lurking. In Shadow Rat's first appearance outside of Mary's mind, he orders the cat to take the 2 children and put them on the conveyor belt. This forces them into a machine, which kills them and spits out endoskeleton parts covered in the remains. In the FNaC 3 minigame, we see a new version of Candy and his sister named Cindy come out of the machine. However, according to the first Candy's game, they aren't made until the 25th of September. so them appearing here is likely a representation of how the twins that the rat and cat murdered eventually become Candy and Cindy. The next day, September 24th, the police tape off the conveyor belt and Mary returns to work. Vinny appears again, but he's twitching, his head moving erratically. Vinny's presence here likely represents Mary's guilt for falling asleep and allowing Rat and Cat to kill the twins. Similar to the last time he appeared, the sad puppet gets closer when Mary moves the camera back to look at him, and the feed cuts. The following night, September 25th, the site has been cleaned up, and Candy and Cindy make their grand debut, sitting on the same conveyor belt the twins were killed on. Vinny, back to his favorite spot in the factory, points at Candy and Cindy, ensuring Mary knows the terrible mistake she's made. When the camera moves back, the cats are staring at her with glowing eyes. It seems like the twins haunted the gore-covered endoskeletons, and those parts were then turned into Candy and Cindy, allowing them to haunt the cats. It appears that some other animatronics were created around this time, those being Chester the chimpanzee and 3 penguins who function as waiters. Just like the cat twins, Chester and one of the penguins are haunted by the victims of the rat and cat. Five Nights at Candy's 2 confirms that 6 people died at the factory. The people who haunt Blank and Old Candy, the twins who possess the new cats, and presumably 2 other people who became Chester and the penguin. On Mary's last night at the factory, she goes through some old recordings in what appears to be an attempt to find something with the rat and cat. She discovers footage of Blank and Old Candy in their prime. Even with this being a recording from 1964, a Vinny hallucination appears behind them, then in a flash of static, he appears in front of the camera, saying his iconic Vinny catchphrase, "A mistake, my mistake, a problem, your problem." This phrase likely refers to the incident at the original theater. Killing the rat and cat actors was the puppeteer's mistake and a problem, which then became Mary's problem as she witnessed the whole event. Anyways, rewinding the footage to earlier on the 13th, she finds what it's presumed she was looking for, footage of the rat. As we previously discussed, he stands up all by himself, turns off the camera, and probably kills some factory workers who end up possessing Old Candy and Blank. After this, Mary's likely fired from her job because she let 2 children die while snoozing on the clock. Back to Candy's Burgers and Fries, Old Candy now resides in parts and service. Andy's replaced by the newly made and newly haunted Candy, Cindy, Chester, and the Penguin. Skipping ahead to November, Jeremy Fitzgerald, twin brother of the purple guy, who may or may have not drawn himself on Blank, gets hired at Freddy's as the night guard. According to MyPOPGOES, Jeremy was a big fan of the Freddy's gang, and likely even came up with his own animal characters, or at least made artwork of the animatronics. During his night shifts, he's haunted by the toy and withered characters, but equipped with a spare Freddy Fazbear mask and flashlight, he fends them off. On the 4th night, the phone guy tells him that the place is under investigation and may have to close for a few days, undoubtedly because of Simon's recent murder spree. The pizzeria temporarily closes, and Jeremy survives the week, transferring to the day shift right after, where he's told to stick close to the animatronics due to their odd behavior. While on the shift, Toy Bonnie mistakes him for his brother Simon, and with the intent of getting revenge on the man who took his life, he lunges at Jeremy, sinking his hard plastic teeth into his skull, going straight into his brain and damaging his frontal lobe. This incident goes on to be known as the Bite of 87, and despite the gruesome attack, Jeremy lives but suffers major psychological trauma. Sometime later, he moves to England and changes his name to Fritz Glade. After Jeremy/Fritz's leave, Freddy's finds somebody named Fritz Smith to take over the night shift. But after his first night, he's fired for his bad odor and tampering with the animatronics. This leads to the closure of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza once again, and the toy animatronics are scrapped for good. Back at Candy's Burgers and Fries, Blank is attacked by a night guard with a wrench, and the culprit is never seen again. It's not clear if he was killed and his body was hidden, or if he simply fled. But regardless, the establishment needs a new guard. Mary Schmidt gets the job, starting on November 15th. Still riddled with guilt, she will sometimes see the words, "You fell asleep," and "It is your fault," when looking at Cam 3. Throughout the week, Mary faces off against the haunted animatronics, using messages left by the junior manager to learn how to survive. She also has access to the cameras with built-in night vision features, so she can see the animatronics' positions throughout the night. Mary's hunted by Candy, Cindy, Chester, Old Candy, and Blank, who all try to break into her office and kill her. The possessed penguin is also a team player, unlike the other 2 non-possessed waiters who broke down, leaving only the haunted penguin. The fact that he's supernatural is likely the reason that he's still functioning, and he uses that ghostly power to try to get into Mary's office and interfere with its systems. She makes it through the week unscathed, and she gets a paycheck of $100.50. Good job, Mary. Even though her hefty paycheck could buy her a mansion, she still isn't satisfied. So the next night, when another guard named Frank is supposed to be working, she takes the shift instead. The junior manager is pretty upset with Mary, considering he thought she wanted to transfer out of the night shifts. It's unclear what she did to get the shift from Frank, but she doesn't get arrested. So oh so glorious Frank thankfully lives. On this night, things are different. The animatronics are way more aggressive than usual, and the thing that Mary possibly came to find reveals itself. Hidden deep in a room that the employees theorize is full of bowling equipment is none other than the rat. And at last, he emerges. While in the pursuit to kill Mary, he stays hidden in the dark corners, making sure to remain unseen by the other animatronics. If not, the penguin would ram him at 30 miles per hour, killing him instantly. Seriously, in a Five Nights at Candy's 3 minigame, we see that the animatronics try to attack Rat, likely wanting revenge on the rodent who killed them. But anyway, Mary survives the night and gets paid $20.10 for overtime. After this, she returns once more to Candy's Burgers and Fries and tampers with the animatronics for the custom night. There are a few ways this concludes. In every ending, Mary's fired for wearing too much perfume and messing with the robots, so we know that all goes down the same way. But in the 720 ending, when Mary's let go, the origami cat is left on the desk. There are two other endings which are nearly identical, in which Mary deactivates all of the animatronics except maybe the penguin and lets the power in the office run out, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Here, she thinks to herself, now I've done it. No more power, no lights, nothing. No danger, no worries, no fun. Just me, alone in the dark. All I can do now is wait it out and think about what I've done. So Mary simply sits and thinks to herself, dealing with her trauma internally. Afterwards, she gets fired as normal. We theorize that sometime after Mary's let go, she has a nightmare about candies that plays out in the Null Night. This secret level begins with Mary checking the main stage, where Shadow Candy appears. When she lowers the monitor, he's standing in the office and quickly attacks her. She's then transported to a strange version of Candy's Burgers and Fries, which doesn't seem to be quite real. The odd purplish lighting, the origami cat on the desk, and Shadow Candy's new eerie abilities, such as only appearing in either the darkness or the light, make it clear that this night isn't set in reality. This likely takes place within Mary's mind, as that's where the origami cat was featured in Candy's 3. He appears as an Easter egg throughout this game, but that seems to be a hallucination that quickly vanishes. In the Null Night, he's here to stay, suggesting that this whole sequence is either in Mary's dreamscape or deepscape. Shadow Candy's presence also further hints at this being in the deepscape, as that's where he appeared back when he was the Shadow Cat. At the beginning of the night, you can also see that Blank is missing, implying from the start that this whole thing isn't real. Whatever it is, Shadow Candy will slowly make his way towards the office from Cam 13. Mary will have to find and stare at him until he fades away, retreating to the rat's dingy closet. If she fails, he'll reach his hands out and approach her, stealing some of her power if he gets locked out in time. Though if he makes it inside, he'll set back the clock by an hour and take the origami cat, forcing him to find where he hid him on the cameras. Collecting the paper cat returns both him and the hour that Shadow Candy stole. Once Mary survives this night, her story is pretty much done. She is mentioned later in FNaC 2 and MyPOPGOES, but she doesn't have to deal with the haunted animatronics anymore. 2 years later, in 1989, we see that the rat's room has been locked up, keeping the evil within contained. However, stupid Chester looks for a key to open it up. For what reason? I have no idea. Maybe he wants to destroy his killer? While searching, he steps into the parts and service room, revealing that he, Candy, and Cindy are all being upgraded. Though unfortunately for Chester, his version 2 was rejected. He then makes his way into the office and finds the original Vinny himself above the key. But he only appears for a split second before vanishing. Vinny's inclusion here seems to have no real relevance, and it's unknown if this will even be included in Five Nights at Candy's 2DX, which is the official fanverse release of the second game. But for the time being, we'll keep it in the story. Chester picks up the key, then unlocks the rat's door, and that's where the minigame ends. For some reason, Chester doesn't kill the evil rodent. Instead, he and Old Candy are disassembled by employees, and their parts are stashed in boxes within parts and services. The old cat was likely disassembled because he's useless to the restaurant, but we're not quite sure why Chester was taken apart. It's possible he was dismantled because Rat may have damaged him upon entering his room. You would think that the rat destroyed Chester, considering last we saw he was unlocking his closet, but according to the candy's creator Emil Mako, that's not the case. Following this, his stage is taped off and prepped for removal. Later, the rat once again emerges and scatters Chester's body parts throughout the restaurant. During this time, the penguin wakes up and, upon leaving parts and services, finds one of Chester's arms in the middle of the room. The rat quickly closes his door, apparently satisfied with his destruction for now. Penguin then waddles his way around the establishment. He picks up the rest of Chester's pieces and returns them to his box, leaving them to be shipped off to the Robotics Corp factory, where he's eventually reassembled. Around a year later, Mary Schmidt gives birth to her daughter, Marilyn Schmidt, although we don't know anything about her father. Yet another year later, in 1991, the new Candy and Cindy animatronics replaced the older ones, as evidenced by children's drawings mentioning the new versions. But despite being new and shiny, these guys are still haunted by the twins that the cat murdered. Sometime after, Blank wakes up and picks up drawings left in the restaurant after dark. Once he collects all 4, he goes back to sleep. The following year, Candy's tie winds up in the office. Though unconfirmed, it's likely the rat took it and put it there. Candy, being sad and tieless, sends Cindy to return it to him. And shockingly, without any intervention from the rat, she gets the tie and gives it back to its rightful owner. In 1993, yes, again, 1 year later, an unnamed night guard dies at the cold metal hands of the rat. We see this depicted in a FNaC 3 minigame, where the rat has to sneak past the other animatronics as he makes his way towards the office. Shadow Candy also appears outside of the office window, and yes, this is clearly Shadow Candy, not one of the other cat characters. Candy, Cindy, and Old Candy are all accounted for, even if Old Candy technically shouldn't be here, more on that at the end of this video. This sprite also has the exact same body and eye color as the Shadow Rat's minigame appearance. And this cat doesn't harm the rat, unlike the other characters. As to why he's outside the window, it could just be a reference to his secret appearance in the original Five Nights at Candy's, but it might hint that he was distracting the guard so his partner in crime could get into the office. As the rat approaches the security guard, you can see he's looking out the window. However, this might be wrong, as Shadow Candy vanishes if you touch him, which is strange, but was likely added to confirm that he's a ghost. Regardless, the rat murders this poor guard, but he's not Mary, so who cares? Later that day, the body is found and reported to the police, leading to an investigation. Cop cars surround the restaurant and officers search the building. Meanwhile, Candy wakes up and scouts the place, his search leading him to the security office. Inside, he finds the bloody mess left by old Randy. Somehow knowing Candy's seen his work, he begins to laugh, directing Candy to what was once Chester's room. Before he can confront the rodent, Rat slams his door shut, and cops, presuming it was Candy who had killed the guard, burst into the room with batons out. The robot cat gets tased by a really happy technician, and with that, he, his remaining friends, and the rat are sent to the robotics factory, and Candy's Burgers and Fries is shut down, presumably along with CTC Entertainment as well. One of the animatronics, excited to no longer be stuck in a burger restaurant, parties too hard and winds up murdering a robotics employee, leading to the factory being shut down too. With Candy's Burgers and Fries closed for good, let's go back to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which is speculated to have reopened sometime in the early 90s. This smaller scale establishment uses the refurbished withered animatronics previously seen in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Unlike their past locations, Fazbear Entertainment just can't seem to make this one a hit. After being open for an unknown amount of time, Fazbear tries to sell off the pizzeria to any companies willing to buy it. With their reputation forever smeared by Simon's murders, no one is willing to purchase it. Due to a lack of revenue, Fazbear Entertainment is forced to close the establishment by the end of 1993. 1 month before their closure, they hire a new night guard named Mike Schmidt, who shockingly has no relation to Mary Schmidt. The week before he starts his work, the phone guy, who was last seen in FNAF 2, takes the night shift and records messages to help him settle in and not get forcefully stuffed into a Freddy Fazbear suit. He manages to leave one each night, but before he can record his fourth, the animatronics ambush him, forcing him to use all of his power before killing him. On November 8th, Mike shows up for his first shift, and for 5 nights, he uses the information on the pre-recorded messages to survive. After his 5th shift ends, he decides to do some overtime and comes back for the next night. For that, he gets paid $120.50. Mike, however, rolling in cash, isn't done just yet. He shows up yet again for a total of 7 nights at Freddy's and tampers with the animatronics, making them as aggressive or uncaring as he wants. After this move, Fazbear gets sick of him and fires him for messing with the animatronics, along with unprofessionalism and his bad smell, the opposite of what Mary was fired for. Following this, Freddy Fazbear's final pizzeria closes, and Fazbear Entertainment presumably goes bankrupt, ending 1993 with a bang. Simon, catching wind of this news, sneaks into the pizzeria on a rainy day, eager to tie up loose ends. He hides in the safe room as a mysterious character known as Shadow Freddy lures the animatronics right to him. Simon pops out once the bots get close and dismantles them one by one. First, Freddy, followed by Bonnie, then Chica, and finally Foxy. Simon thinks he's won. However, he's just freed his victims from their mental prisons. The ghosts manifest and corner him in the safe room. One of the spirits chases him into the Spring Bonnie suit while the rest watch. Simon laughs at his victims, thinking he's once again got away, but he finally gets a good dose of karma when the spring locks in the suit fail, likely having gotten wet thanks to the water leaking through the ceiling. The animatronic parts are released straight into Simon's body, merging him with Spring Bonnie. He bleeds out on the floor, drowning in his own blood as the spirits disappear. In an even worse twist of fate for Simon, in 1998, he misses the birth of his niece, Bonnie Glade. Speaking of children, let's focus on Marilyn Schmidt, the now 17-year-old daughter of Mary Schmidt. In August of 2007, she loses a bet that she made with her friends, forcing her to spend 5 whole nights in the abandoned robotics factory. Shockingly, this won't be her first time. Apparently she spent 5 nights in the factory before. To not raise any suspicion, she tells her parents that she's spending the night at her friend's house. Once she arrives, she travels to the 2nd floor, presumably above where the twins were murdered. She finds an old office set up for her. It comes equipped with cameras and the ability to ring phones located around the factory. After settling in, she realizes that she's not alone. Locked inside with her are the withered animatronics. No, not those. These withered animatronics. Every one of them is covered in jagged rips and broken parts. Rat may be responsible for damaging the candy's characters. The FNaC 2 trailer also glitches out when the text, "They were left to rot," appears, and instead it reads, "They were left to rat," further implying that Rat might have had a hand in making the animatronics so withered. As the week goes on, the animatronics get more aggressive. Candy, Cindy, and Blank roam the halls, Penguin messes with the factory's electronics, and Chester hits the vents in an attempt to break through. Marilyn has to use the factory's phones to lure the animatronics around the building. Luckily, she survives her payless shifts and completes the bet. A newspaper reveals that the factory has been scheduled for demolition the following week. But before that, Marilyn sticks around for a 6th night. Here, Candy and his crew are absent. Instead, she gets a visit from her mom's 2 favorite characters, the rat and cat. These lethal lovebirds attempt to kill Marilyn, and if they do succeed, it results in a different game over screen. When any of the Candy's animatronics kill you, an article declaring Marilyn is missing is shown. However, if the rat or cat get you, then you're treated to a newspaper confirming Marilyn is dead in a murder so grisly that it resembles a bear attack. But the duo's efforts are in vain as Marilyn survives the night. In the ending newspaper, we learn that fires started inside the factory and destroyed the building, presumably melting the animatronics' plastic prisons and allowing their souls to finally rest. At around 7 AM, firefighters showed up at the Inferno, and after an hour of trying to stop the fire, nothing but rubble was left. The cause of the fire is never fully explained. While the article cites faulty wiring or overheated equipment as the culprit, it's possible that Marilyn herself set the fire after witnessing the horrors within the factory. With this, the Candy story is over, at least until FNaC 4. But for now, let's move back to Popgoes. During our time with the Schmidts, Fritz Glade / Jeremy Fitzgerald's daughter, Bonnie Glade, has grown, learning to speak, to walk, and to hear ghosts. But before we can touch on that, you may be wondering why she was named Bonnie in the first place. The answer is actually quite simple. Her father named her Bonnie as a way to love that name again after his encounter with Toy Bonnie. With that out of the way, when Bonnie's young, she's a big fan of Freddy Fazbear and his friends, much like her father once was. She even draws her own cast of animal performers who run their very own pizzeria joint named the Popgoes Pizzeria. In this imaginary establishment, Oliver Popgoes Evergreen, more commonly known as Popgoes the Weasel, is the lead singer. Freddy Fazbear gave him his black top hat so the Weasel could take over his role. Popgoes has another suspicious tie to Freddy's. As indicated by Bonnie's sketches, his birthday is June 26th, the same day as some of her uncle's murders at Freddy's. However, the original Popgoes game was released on June 26th, 2016, so it might just be a nod to that. On a less disturbing note, Popgoes doesn't perform alone. Twin sisters Sarah and Saffron Silverleaf serve as the bassist and guitarist. These twins do almost everything together, but have very different personalities. Sarah is more girly and quiet, while Saffron is a loud, punk rock tomboy. I also love how much Saffron is written like an actual child's OC. She just likes normal clothes, broccoli, and rules. Let's move on to Blake Bedingfield. who, besides maybe having the most British animal name I've ever heard, serves as the Imaginary Pizzeria's clever technological assistant. He helps guests and fixes any electrical issues. Blake is pretty much the handyman of the group, and he's where Deer Hunt Productions team member Blake gets her username from. I also noticed that Blake dislikes Saffron, perhaps because she's too rowdy. Moving on to Stone Ashby, he spends most of his time as the pizzeria's sign holder. If Popgoes or any of his friends can't perform, he'll step in and take their place until they're able to get back on stage. The last two of Bonnie's characters don't work at the Popgoes Pizzeria, instead, they're close friends of the gang. First up is Penelope Menora Quinn, a wood mouse who is a massive fan of the Popgoes Pizzeria, mostly Popgoes himself. She has a big crush on him. However, according to Wimps the Weeper from Popgoes Arcade, he doesn't fancy her. Regardless, she frequents the pizzeria just to see the weasel, even though she dislikes pizza. She also doesn't like robots, which comes into play later on. Penelope actually gave herself the name Menora as a pun, just like her idols. Her name is based on the phrase, "Are you a man or a mouse?" Popgoes the Weasel's pun name is self-explanatory, and Stone's name is based on the old phrase, "Stone the Crows." Speaking of him, the last character is Holly Hartwell, a European Robin who has an unclear relationship with Stone. She doesn't get too involved with the group, instead, she works at her older sister's egg farm, which I think might be an adoption center. The Popgoes gang all love her company, but she insists on not sticking around for too long, as to not take up too much of their time. With this, Bonnie's very own animal gang is born. When giving her mom updates on the cast, she's very supportive of her work and her fascination with Freddy's. She even buys her a possibly off-brand Chica plushie. However, Fritz takes some time to get used to this. At first, he's worried about her interest in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza because of his troubled past there. It's also implied that he believes the restaurant, or even Freddy Fazbear himself, is unlucky. Later, he feels more comfortable and asks about Bonnie's characters, seeming genuinely enthralled by them. Her mom later tells her how, before her father was injured at Freddy's, he was a major fan of the establishment, and that Popgoes and the gang really resonated with him. 2 weeks later, in a failed attempt to bond with Bonnie, Fritz makes his very own Popgoes character named Morse the Mole. Unfortunately, Bonnie doesn't like him at all. She thinks his big, wide smile is creepy, and he's not the most original. He has a scarf like Stone, and similar to Menora, he has a backpack and orange coloring. Each of the Popgoes characters has a special color, so Morse being orange messes things up. His backpack full of gadgets also makes him ill-fitting in the Popgoes world. The sci-fi aspect of Morse seems to come from Fritz's obsession with technology, making him a sort of self-insert, which gives his later usage more weight. Bonnie tells her dad that she hates Morse, but feels bad about it later, since he doesn't do many creative things. She even considers letting Morse join her cast of characters. But on the other hand, she doesn't like how her dad tried to add his own stuff to her work. Sometime later, Bonnie and her mom take a trip to a graveyard to visit her grandmother Rose. It starts to get really windy, but strangely only on Bonnie's face. When approaching her grandmother's grave, the wind gets quieter and quieter. Eventually, the sound of the breeze turns into a voice, seemingly the voice of her deceased grandma. Naturally, this freaks Bonnie out, but the voice tells her nice things and to keep this ability a secret, at least for now. Speaking of secrets, since Bonnie's grandma is a ghost, that indicates that she was killed by another person, which the creator of Popgoes himself, Kane Carter, has confirmed. We don't know what happened, and I doubt this will ever be elaborated upon, but it's interesting nonetheless. Anyways, on the way home, Bonnie's mother notices something wrong, but sticking to her grandmother's advice, she doesn't tell her anything. When lying in bed, Bonnie thinks about what happened, trying to figure out if there's something wrong with her, or if she can actually hear the dead. Part of her is excited if that turns out to be the case, which, unsurprisingly, it is. Bonnie ponders whether or not she can hear other ghosts in the graveyard and maybe do something about it. She even thinks about asking her parents to go back to the graveyard, but then they would definitely know that something is up. On Bonnie's 10th birthday, her dad, busy with work, gives her a nicely wrapped gift, hoping she can forgive him for his absence once she sees what's inside. Upon opening the present, she's greeted with a 3D printed Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and a note with instructions. Fritz tells Bonnie that her characters reminded him of the love he once had for Freddy's. Though with it no longer existing, she can't experience the fantasy and fun for herself, which is probably a good thing. But Popgoes can visit this tiny Freddy's anytime she'd like. He calls it MyPOPGOES. In this pizzeria, Bonnie has to make sure her Popgoes is well taken care of throughout 5 levels of resource management. In each one, she has to make sure he's well fed, hydrated, and not literally bored to death. If she gets tired of these, there's an endless mode and a plethora of minigames that she can enjoy too. These include fishing, snake, pest control, and food juggling, along with Whack-A-Rabbit, which I think Fritz took some liberties on, including Morse the Mole with an army of robot weasels. In addition, the game also comes with colored cartridges that can change your Popgoes into someone else from the band. Ending the section off on a dark note, Bonnie's mom passes away sometime following her birthday. It's never made clear what happened, but Bonnie's birthday card does mention taking care of her mom, so it's likely that she was sick. All we know for sure is that she passes after Bonnie's 10th birthday. Chances are it's years after, but still not good. On an even darker note, Simon returns in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. In the year 2023, 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed its doors, the horrific events there are nothing more than rumor and memory. But a local amusement park decides to cash in on those stories. They settle on creating a haunted house called Fazbear's Fright. This attraction features all sorts of props and relics from Fazbear's disturbing history, including the remains of the animatronics, although thankfully, none of them are functioning. The main gameplay starts a week before the attraction opens, with yet another security guard. However, unlike the previous games, night one goes smoothly. No haunted robots, no worries, nothing. But as we know, it doesn't stay like that forever. While the Fright's employees search abandoned Freddy's locations for props, someone who helped design the FNAF 1 pizzeria tells them about the boarded up safe room. They break it open and find the rotting Spring Bonnie suit, which is very obviously inhabited by a human corpse. But despite all the red flags that should be going off in their heads, they decide to take this whole crime scene to the haunted house anyway. From night 2 onward, Simon, now known as Springtrapped, hunts down the Fazbear's Fright guard, who is also bombarded by phantoms of the previous animatronics, although they might just be hallucinations caused by the faulty, sometimes corpse-filled ventilation. The guard is armed with only an old-fashioned security system, a button to play the audio of children laughing in each room, and a slow tablet that can reset the ventilation, audio lures, and camera visibility. No night guard has ever been so unprepared. Luckily for them, Springtrapped's animatronic mode is set to follow sound cues, allowing the guard to lure him around with the sound of children. But there's more going on than simple survival. The player can access minigames where they have to find the souls of Simon's victims and help set them free. After tracking down the ghosts throughout the minigames, all of the spirits are finally given their happiest day, and the 5th night ends with all the souls at rest. However, the following night concludes with Fazbear's Fright burning to the ground, similar to the ending of Five Nights at Candy's 2. While authorities haven't ruled out foul play, it seems like faulty wiring is what caused the fire. Alternatively, similar to Marilyn, the guard might have set the attraction ablaze to kill off Springtrapped. Regardless, it seems like Simon does perish here. I don't believe it's been confirmed yet, but in the Popgoes 2016 lore, Simon dying at Fazbear's Fright was a pretty significant part of the story, so I assume that remains unchanged. After the fire, any surviving props are auctioned off, which includes Freddy Fazbear's iconic top hat and the always soppy box of parts. It appears in Evergreen Squirrel Sisters jumpscare video. You can't even see Toy Bonnie's guitar sticking out of it. These 2 items, and possibly even more, are won by Fritz, who will later use Freddy's hat for his own animatronic band. Around the same time, Marilyn Schmidt returns as Bonnie's internet friend. Now as an adult, Bonnie is a very different style. Instead of her colorful childhood clothing, she wears a much darker palette, and more importantly, an amazing Dat Taste shirt. Dat Taste was a brand of soda that appeared throughout the candy series, and it seems that Bonnie's a fan of it. On the topic of candies, during a long chat with Marilyn, she tells Bonnie about conversations that she has with her mom, which act as a kind of therapy for them after the events of the Candies trilogy. Realizing how wildly similar Mary's experiences are to her own dad's, Bonnie begins to feel envious. Anytime she tries to talk to her dad about his trauma, he closes up and pushes her away, leaving her feeling responsible to help him get over it. This gives her a great idea. Using their parents' stories, Bonnie's gift, some research, and science, the women come up with the Violet Project, a big documentation of their data that can help the world finally understand the supernatural, and aid Fritz in understanding and getting over his trauma. Sometime later in April of 2023, Fritz asks the now 25-year-old Bonnie if she can go up to the attic and grab his toolbox from the chest. Inside, Bonnie finds her old off-brand Chica plush, the toolbox she's been looking for, a toy Bonnie mask that she made using one of her dad's 3D printers, and a cardboard box containing her old MyPOPGOES toy. Bonnie reminisces about playing MyPOPGOES, which leads into the main gameplay and story that we previously discussed. Once the player completes the main campaign, they return to the present, where Bonnie is lost in thought. Fritz, a little confused, asks if she's found the toolbox yet, snapping her back to reality. She grabs his toolbox and heads back downstairs. This may seem like a totally random event in the timeline, but it's theorized that Bonnie might be grabbing the toolbox since Fritz has started working on life-size animatronic versions of Popgoes in the band for their very own Popgoes Pizzeria. 1 year later, in 2024, the research for the Violet Project has progressed, giving Bonnie and Marilyn a theory that possessions only occur when the actions of another soul kill someone. This research will soon be put to the test, but in lighter news, the Popgoes Pizzeria is complete, and it's almost 1-to-1 with Bonnie's original vision thanks to Fritz's animatronics. Popgoes, Sarah, and Saffron take the stage as Stone stands outside, directing customers. Blake sits in the server room, only coming out to check on guests. He seems to be tied to the Weaselware operating system, which, in Popgoes 2016, controlled all the animatronics and machines in the pizzeria. Popgoes Arcade establishes that system and implies that everything in the restaurant is tied to it, so it looks like all that old lore still holds up. The establishment also features 3D printers in almost every room, allowing customers to print toys of their favorite Popgoes or Freddy's characters. But it doesn't end there. The pizzeria includes an art room where guests can paint their newly printed figures so they look perfect when they're taken home. Speaking of the Freddy's animatronics, much like in Bonnie and Glade's imaginary Popgoes gang, the real Popgoes wears Freddy's top hat with a green ribbon tied around it. As we mentioned earlier, Fritz also got the box of parts from Fazbear's Fright. It's stored in the photo room, likely so its contents can be used as props for photo ops. Though this pizzeria looks and sounds amazing, per FNAF fashion, something always goes wrong. One late night, Bonnie decides to take her old Toy Bonnie mask from the attic and break into the pizzeria. As of writing this video, it's not very clear what she's doing there, but we'll touch on our theories later. Now inside the server room, Bonnie opens a server cabinet and takes off a floor panel. However, she's spotted by her father. Seeing the Toy Bonnie mask triggers his trauma, and he's now fully convinced the actual Toy Bonnie is messing around in his server room. Before I continue, most of the attack I'm about to describe is purely based on what we noticed in the image of the aftermath, so take all of this as speculation. He grabs an emergency fire axe and swings at Bonnie, hitting her upper body and making her drop the floor panel. She turns around, trying to head to the back of the room to gain some distance from Fritz and take off her mask, but he's too quick. He hits her in the shoulder and she falls to the floor. Her mask slides away from her newly deceased corpse as she lands. Fritz, now realizing what he's done, ditches the axe and flees, thinking of what to do next. Meanwhile, since Bonnie was intentionally murdered by another human, she becomes a ghost. Her soul possesses the Weaselware servers as indicated by the blue lights turning red. Back to Fritz, he naturally chooses the rational option of taking his daughter's body home and hiding it in the attic chest, something that was seen in the MyPOPGOES ending. According to Kane Carter, Fritz separated some of Bonnie's limbs to fit her into this chest, hence her unnatural position. This is a slight change from Popgoes 2016, where Fritz's attack on Bonnie left her cut into 6 pieces. Regardless, Fritz locks her remains inside the chest. Finally, he dumps in a body of water, presumably an ocean, never to be seen again. Fritz also tosses the axe down a well to dispose of the murder weapon. The next day, the events of Popgoes Arcade occur. Here we put in the shoes of a regular patron at the Popgoes Pizzeria, a young girl who decides to play an arcade called Popgoes The Dead Forest. It's never clearly stated that we play as a girl in this game, but you can faintly see her shadow during the main gameplay, and King Carter confirmed the player's gender on Discord. Anyways, this is no ordinary arcade. Bonnie's ghost in the Weaselware system ends up being sucked into the titular Popgoes Arcade. This game within a game has a very detailed world and story that I believe is worth discussing, as it not only offers strong world building, but also draws parallels to events in the series. The first campaign in this game is The Dead Forest, named after the scrapped Popgoes 2016 sequel. This world closely resembles Bonnie's original Diary of the Popgoes characters, with all the animals living in a forest. However, this land is ruled over by Freddy's father, a bear overlord who is researching the supernatural. According to Kane Carter, this king is eventually murdered by either a living or haunted thing, but the identity of the culprit isn't important. His son Freddy becomes king after his passing, but a week later, he can't bring himself to pick up the ghostly research. The next night, the spirit of Freddy's father haunts a painting in the castle and directs his son to a book, which explains the rules of hauntings in the CPU. If another creature kills you, you get a second chance at life as a ghost. The following night, Freddy feels a bit useless. No one talks to him and he has nothing to say. But he wants to make something groundbreaking to make his father proud. On the 4th night, he confirms that his father's spirit is still in the castle with him. And he notes that he did mention something about how the presence of the paranormal might have a permanent effect on the mental state of nearby entities. As in, being near ghosts might make you go a bit cuckoo. He used the word corrupt a lot when referring to that kind of behavior. This might explain why Mary, Fritz, and Mike all saw hallucinations throughout the games. Them being near ghosts might have made them go a bit crazy and start seeing things. Anyways, Freddy's final diary ends with, "I've come up with an idea." We later learn that King Freddy decides that life would be better for everyone if they were all dead creatures. It'd mean they wouldn't need to eat, drink, sleep, breathe, or die. They could live forever if they were dead. He partners with a familiar neglected character, Morse the Mole, also known as the Machinist. In the arcade lore, he aspired to become part of the Popgoes crew, but his weird, cruel ideas made him an outcast, calling back to how, when Fritz created him, Bonnie rejected the mole. This could also serve as a nod to Bonnie and Fritz's strained relationship. But back to the world of Popgoes Arcade. In exchange for King Freddy letting Morse do whatever he wants with the underground, the mole built some lasers that would drain the life of everything and everyone. The North Forest ultimately succumbs to these lasers, making most of the living things there dead, giving it the name the Dead Forest. These lasers are installed in the other forests, making all the animals corrupt and hostile. This is where the game properly begins, with the player taking control of Popgoes the Weasel as he goes on a quest to save the land. Guarding Freddy's evil lasers are corrupted versions of Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie. But luckily, Popgoes manages to defeat them and the corrupted creatures in the forests. Not only that, but he finds keys allowing him to enter the locked up Dead Forest. When exploring, the girl playing the game gets a glimpse of Bonnie's ghost floating down a river, which will be important later on. Popgoes makes his way to the castle, where he encounters a corrupted version of BB, which actually stands for Buffoon Boy rather than Balloon Boy. Judging from the hat, it seems like he's the castle jester. Popgoes bests him in battle, and he scurries off with 1 HP left. Wah. Wah. Oh shoot, I'm recording. Unfortunately, the castle door is locked, meaning Popgoes needs even more keys. Oh, and even worse, beating up Buffoon Boy activated the kill switch, which brings all the previous enemies back to life even stronger. Luckily, BB is here to help. During the battle, Popgoes knocks some sense into him, a unique reaction which likely occurred since BB is a human, unlike everyone else. After this, he snuck into the castle and stole some special abilities that Freddy had previously offered him. And when the player completes his hit list, BB hands them over. Popgoes once again defeats Freddy's goons and deactivates the life-draining lasers, which stops the dead animals from spawning. He also takes the abilities and possibly the souls of the bosses, which he uses to get into new areas of the forest and find castle keys. The player can also upgrade these abilities with emerald coins. With all the keys, abilities, and possibly BB's bonuses collected, Popgoes enters the castle and faces dead King Freddy. The skeleton bear tells him that he's really thrown a wrench into his plans. It's later revealed that Freddy has no clue what a wrench is and was just mimicking something Morse said. Anyways, the king tells Popgoes how amazing being dead is and kindly offers to show him. The ensuing battle's tough, but as always, Popgoes prevails. As Freddy perishes, he tells him, "You have won, but on your last day on Earth, you'll regret you did. Yes, you will. When you succumb to a natural end, and your body rots into the soil, you would have wished you had the second chance I was going to give you." With the evil ruler defeated, everyone thanks Popgoes and discusses fixing the North Forest. Despite the campaign being completed, there's still more going on here. In the castle, there's a glitching wall which the player can phase through to follow Bonnie's ghost. Remember, earlier the girl playing the arcade saw her spirit heading down the river. Once she walks through the wall, she finds herself in what appears to be an ocean with an ominous chest. If this seems familiar, it's because this is exactly what happened to Bonnie's body. It was sealed in a chest and tossed into a body of water, likely the ocean. Instead of finding a corpse in the chest, the player obtains a mysterious key, which can be used at the fountain to make the world go dark and give Popgoes a new task. Instead of this being an objective like every other quest in the game, this one is listed as a directive, which is an official or authoritative instruction, more on that later. The directive presented to the player is simply collect. The probably terrified girl playing this game has to explore this dark, ghostly world devoid of NPCs. Eventually she finds strange parts, and after collecting 6 of them, they'll form something that resembles a dismembered rabbit. The directive then changes to simply, find me. This may seem vague at first, but in the South Forest there's a blood-filled well as a nod to Fritz's evidence disposal. You could even find an axe floating in there earlier. Since that well is tied to Bonnie's haunting, interacting within the ghost world transports the player to the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 minigames. These are now all devoid of spirits, as the ghosts of Simon's victims were set free back in that game. However, one ghost resides at the final table in the Happiest Day minigame. This is, of course, Bonnie Glade, who appears as the corrupted Bonnie boss from earlier. If the player attacks her at any point, a new form of Bonnie Glade known as the Black Rabbit will emerge and smash through the arcade. This is what the player assembled earlier with the 6 black pieces, and she strongly resembles Shadow Bonnie. According to Kane Carter, you can safely assume that in the CPU, Shadow Bonnie serves as some sort of cosmic foreshadowing for the Black Rabbit, but he probably has no real canonical purpose. Anyways, this jump scare seems to just be a hallucination, and it can be avoided if the player doesn't attack Bonnie. Being a pacifist causes the arcade to glitch further, and the Bonnie sprite turns black and gray, resembling the Black Rabbit. She'll sometimes glitch into other forms. Noteworthy appearances include her wielding an axe, and one even seems to depict her Uncle Simon being spring-locked. Speaking of which, 2 others appear to reference Bonnie and Shadow Bonnie's minigame appearances from FNAF 3. There's also a sprite based on Chef Wanted, which was a fan game that Kane Carter, Emil Nacco, and Cian Mewburn were working on before canceling it to focus on candies and Popgoes. Back to the present, Bonnie Glade urges the player not to attack her, saying she's not controlling this and is trying to calm down. She explains how she can feel everything in the game, but she knows it's fake, that she's trapped in a machine and unintentionally controlling it, explaining all the paranormal activity. Bonnie realizes now that all of her research was true. She died from the actions of another person and now exists as a flash of who she was, a ghost. Instead of feeling scared, she's almost excited. Bonnie explains who she is and says that she might even recognize the child playing the game. But regardless, she needs to move on and find something else. She thanks the girl for her company and apologizes if she scared her before her sold parts from the arcade, removing all the ghostly elements from the machine. With Dead King Freddy defeated and Bonnie's spirit now freed, the player can progress to the second campaign, Popgoes and the Machinist. As the name suggests, this one focuses on Morse the Mole, who controls Underground as part of his deal with Freddy. His end goal is to replace everyone with robots, and to kick off this evil scheme, he abducts Menorah, which isn't entirely random. As Bonnie complained about in her diary, he has the same special color as her, that being orange. To save Menorah, Popgoes has to find 3 keycards to access Morse's lair. This means defeating all sorts of robotic foes, including new versions of Chica, Foxy, and finally Bonnie, who resembles withered Bonnie. Throughout this adventure, Morse watches Popgoes with hidden cameras around the map, learning more about his movements and attack patterns to improve his robots. Once Popgoes defeats his mechanical adversaries and collects all 3 keycards, he's able to enter Morse's lair where he's keeping Menorah. The Weasel and Mole battle, with the orange character having built his own abilities to mimic Popgoes. During the fight, he creates lasers to drain the Weasel's life, and even makes him fight a prototype Menorah midway through the battle. However, Popgoes still prevails, which apparently Morse already expected. He just wanted to witness things firsthand. In the final moments of his life, he talks about how he made his powers himself, unlike how Popgoes stole them from others. Morse asks if he was impressed and wonders if he could have been one of the gang before perishing. Since Morse seems to represent Fritz, and Popgoes is Bonnie's original character, this scene could be read as a parallel to their troubled relationship. Both Fritz and Morse also make robots of the Popgoes gang, further strengthening their connection. Even more interesting is that in this campaign, Holly and Menorah never get finished robots, just like in the Popgoes Pizzeria. But back to the story in the arcade world, the second campaign ends with Popgoes rescuing a Schmidt and Menorah. I also want to point out that Menorah's sketch from MyPOPGOES cites her as disliking robots, and this campaign adds some extra significance to that. Despite Morse being defeated, there's still more story in this game, sadly none of which involves the mole spirit coming back for revenge. Although according to Kane Carter, it's safe to assume a spirit lingers in the caves. However, to access this new content, the arcade sets the girl playing it back to before the machinist's demise. She now discovers robot BBs that Morse locked up in the underground areas, and these little guys can be used to smelt scrap into coins. All of these BBs have different personalities, and Robot BB is especially a riot. I love it when he says the machinist was committing tax fraud or something. That being said, once the player smelts enough scrap, the bots run out of battery. Their deaths are all pretty sad, but the player does get new mallets to decorate the in walls with. These balloon boys aren't the only notable robots underground. The player travels back to the caves where she defeated Robot Foxy, and the lights down there are mysteriously flickering. This is revealed to be caused by the Mangle, an amalgamation of all sorts of creatures haunted by the spirit of King Freddy. The ensuing battle is difficult, but Popgoes prevails and once again defeats Freddy. He reflects on his previous forms, first flesh, then bones, now machine. With fear, he wonders what's next as he once again dies. Defeating the Mangle makes the lights underground stop flickering and grants the player Freddy's scythe. Rewards aside, Freddy is definitely meant to be representation of Simon Fitzgerald. Both of them strive to control death after experiencing loss. Freddy's scheme to make everyone immortal using his life-draining lasers sounds very similar to how Simon wanted to give death rules. Furthermore, in Death as an Animal, the example of Simon taming Death is Freddy, connecting him to dead King Freddy and possibly hinting that he might want to use the power of the supernatural to supersede death. King Freddy also comes back as a robot, similar to Popgoes 2016, where Fritz made a robot replica of his brother. All the enemy types in Arcade can also be seen as a representation of Simon's life. The corrupted enemies are hostile, but still alive, similar to Simon's life as a human. Then the undead enemies symbolize his second life as Springtrapped. Dead Bonnie is even missing an ear just like him. Finally, the robot characters seem to be a nod to the Simon robot, a character who will be a major part of Popgoes Evergreen. In 2016, Simon was an AI created by Fritz in the image of his dead brother. His role in the CPU is a bit more vague, but we'll theorize about him later. There's a whole other can of worms in the North Forest. The animals are currently working on restoring this area, but it's sealed off for the time being. In reality, this is because Fritz decided to cut it from the game, using the gate from the first campaign to do so. However, that automatically spawns keys to open it, so we block those off with the Woodpecker NPC. But he forgot to wipe its code, which is a strange connection to the paint bots in the forest. And of course, he left a whole developer note about this attached to the well in the South Forest. The player follows this hint and defeats the paint bots, then puts on those colors, causing the Woodpecker NPCs to glitch. She uses this method to collect all 3 keys and return to the dead forest, where she dives into the depths of the game, revealing a scrapped robot Freddy mini-boss. Wimps the Weeper actually theorizes that a robot Freddy might be the machinist, but says that would be boring. Anyways, the girl controlling Popgoes descends even further, eventually ending up in the Weaselware network. Here she accesses the security footage from Cam 7, revealing the previously analyzed footage of Bonnie's death. I doubt that the girl playing the arcade witnessing this will have any real relevance in the story, although Kane does note that she might have thought Bonnie's ghost was part of the game up until this point. Regardless, I thought it was still worth mentioning because it canonically happens. With the 2 main campaigns and their villains out of the way, let's focus on another character who appears throughout Popgoes Arcade, that being the Puppet. This mysterious character contacts Popgoes after he defeats Chica for the first time. They meet up in the inn, but he doesn't give the weasel a name, so he just calls him the Puppet. He tells Popgoes that he's confined to this room, but he's been watching him through the window, which isn't actually on the outside of the inn according to Wimps the Weeper. The Puppet has noticed that while everyone seems to follow scripted instructions, Popgoes is very chaotic, almost like he's being controlled by some unseen force, which is of course the player. The Puppet offers to make Popgoes battles more chaotic with random gifts, which can have positive, neutral, or negative effects. Once the player has encountered every gift, the Puppet offers one final challenge, a fight with him. In a not very surprising twist, the Puppet has really just been turning Popgoes into a weapon. Since he can see the future, he needs someone unpredictable to finally defeat him and free him from his box, from this room, from the world. During the fight, the Puppet gets desperate for Popgoes to kill him, but he realizes that nothing is special about the weasel at all. He's simply a character being puppeted by the player. Eventually, the girl controlling Popgoes prevails, cutting the Puppet's strings and freeing him from the box. After defeating the Puppet, he leaves the player's ribbon, which allows her to select specific battle gifts during enemy encounters. But it serves another function. When she wears it with specific outfit colors, a gift box corresponding to that color will spawn, and each of these has its own unique text, which sheds more light on the Puppet. In every box description, there are shaking letters, and if you put them in the correct order with other colors, you get 3 sentences. I firstly gifted golden hair, I secondly gifted a ship, I thirdly gifted a spear. This seems to be a reference to Loki, not the Marvel character, but the Norse trickster. He got the hair of Thor's wife Sif, and to make up for this, he had dwarves make gifts. Those include new golden hair, a ship that can fold up into a pocket, and a spear that never misses. These match up with the gift box message, implying that the Puppet's mysterious identity is actually Loki. Furthermore, after killing Odin's son named Balder, Loki was chained to a rock where a serpent drips poison. Luckily for him, his wife Sigyn is there to collect it in a bucket, but whenever she leaves, it drips on his face, resulting in immense pain, and apparently that's what causes earthquakes. Cool. Similarly, the Puppet in Popgoes Arcade was banished from another world and trapped in the box, further tying him to Loki. Granted, this doesn't match up 1 for 1, there's no snake and Loki's wife isn't there, but all of this seems to imply that the Puppet's true identity in the arcade story is Loki. This also explains why the Puppet is a jester in Popgoes Arcade, as Loki is quite the mischievous guy slash girl slash horse. But moving on to the actual gift box descriptions, most of them connect to the Popgoes character's special colors. The green one is about being a hero like Popgoes, the yellow one is being intelligent like Blake, the orange one is about being in love, similar to Minora, etc. However, there are a couple of gift boxes that aren't tied to any of the special colors. those being Silver, Indigo, and Violet. However, we can pretty reasonably figure out who these belong to. The Indigo box smells like the ocean, likely where Bonnie's corpse was disposed of, and has a desire to learn, investigate, and be at the core of the mystery. Just like how Bonnie was researching the paranormal and was excited to be a ghost herself. However, the box also feels lost in a new environment and information. Similar to how Bonnie ended up trapped in the arcade and hit with the reality that ghosts and hauntings are indeed real. Now it seems like she's not quite sure what to do with that knowledge, but we'll present some theories later. Moving on, the violet box is clearly tied to Simon. I mean, obviously the color itself is violet, but it smells like metal and machines, just like how Simon is a robot. The sensation described also matches up with Simon's character in the 2016 lore. The box feels ambitious, an appetite for growth, for adapting, learning, evolving, for being bigger, stronger, better. But at the same time, an indescribable loneliness, awareness of total, perhaps sudden abandonment, and as a result, anger. In the Popgoes 2016 story, Simon had an extension called Evolution, which would allow him to quickly learn and evolve, just like how the feeling in the box wants to learn and grow. The feeling of anger also ties back to his character in the original story. Fritz chained him to a wall after realizing what a horrible thing he had created, and Simon eventually killed him in anger. It seems like in the modern story, Simon feels lonely, aware that at any time he could be abandoned, which leads to his anger. This is all just speculation, and we'll share some more thoughts later in this video. The final outlier gift is the silver box. The description reads, "The box is open. A sparkling spectral light glimmers from inside it. It smells clean, like freshly washed clothes, hand soap, and nothing else. Though there's nothing physically in the box, it emits a sensation. The box feels loyal. A constant, selfless dedication to supporting another. To talk, to assist, to genuinely care. But at the same time, a deep and growing sense of uncertainty, discomfort, a crisis of conscience. Sitting, perhaps, on the wrong side, and being trapped there." This box is likely referring to Fritz Glade. Being Bonnie's father, he cares for her. But it's clear that their relationship is a bit messy, hence why there's uncertainty and discomfort. He also murdered her and hid the evidence, which could explain the crisis of conscience. Fritz covered up his horrific crime to save himself. That'd definitely make him feel on the wrong side of things. Another possibility is that this is referring to Marilyn Schmidt, Bonnie Glade's online friend, and the protagonist from Candy's 2. Marilyn's friendship could be what the box is referring to by loyalty and dedication to supporting and caring for another. We also know that she talks to Bonnie a lot. However, the sense of uncertainty and being trapped on the wrong side of things could symbolize how Marilyn and Bonnie are literally countries apart. Or maybe she's unsure of the Violet Project. I think Fritz is the more likely candidate for the silver box, but both interpretations are interesting nonetheless. Once the player has completed everything in the arcade, she leaves the pizzeria and goes home. We then see the establishment later that night as someone, or something, watches the Popgoes the Weasel animatronic enter the arcade. He approaches the 3D printer, intent on printing the Black Rabbit as a vessel for Bonnie Glade. Whoever's watching the Popgoes Pizzeria after dark stops him by resetting the room, and the game ends with a promise to continue the story in Popgoes Evergreen. As of the making and release of this video, Evergreen isn't out yet, though thanks to teasers, information from series creator King Carter, and already released Popgoes games, we can make some guesses on where things will go from here. Since this continues immediately from arcade, it takes place in 2024, and it'll have more traditionally styled FNAF gameplay. The main establishment will of course be the Popgoes Pizzeria, which is closed during the present story, likely because of Bonnie's death. Our protagonist, whoever they may be, has to face off against the Popgoes animatronics who are being controlled by some unseen force. The game page reveals that someone has given them new instructions, and that begs the question, who is puppeting the gang? The obvious suspect is Bonnie Glade. After all, her soul does haunt the Weaselware systems that connect everything in the establishment. If you've played Popgoes 2016, then you know that in that entry, the main gameplay was an experiment conducted by Fritz Glade. It was all designed to test the AI and curiosity of the main character, Strings. This weird-looking guy was originally a dreamcatcher made to defeat Fritz's fear of the puppet. However, in the CPU, it seems like Fritz isn't afraid of him. As according to King Carter, he never saw the puppet on a shift. He also said on Discord that the Evergreen story doesn't necessarily involve the protagonist being a robot. So all that leads me to believe that the gameplay in Evergreen isn't a test. Kane also said that Bonnie is a significant, intelligent presence throughout the game as a ghost, furthering my suspicion that she's the one instructing the animatronics. Furthermore, Saffron's mechanic involves prying open the photo room door, and King Carter's description notes that she probably damages it. I doubt Fritz would allow the pizzeria to get damaged during his experiment. This also leaves the question of who the protagonist is, but frankly, there's very little information on the matter, so I have almost no clue. It could be Fritz, since the post-night section seemed to feature him as the protagonist. However, he was the phone guy in Popgoes 2016, and we know that Evergreen will have lots of dialogue and live conversations. So I assume Fritz will reprise his role as the Popgoes Pizzeria's phone guy. So if he's not the protagonist, then who is? This definitely won't happen, but it'd be cool if Marilyn were the guard as a cover to find out what happened to Bonnie Glade. But again, I highly doubt that'll be the case. So it seems like Evergreen will involve an unknown protagonist trying to fend off the animatronics who are being controlled by Bonnie's spirit and Weaselware. Despite that, I don't think she's the reason Popgoes is printing the Black Rabbit. If you unlock every achievement in MyPOPGOES and linger on the achievement page, the icons change to spell out, "Bring back my Bonnie to me." It seems like this message is from Fritz, given how possessive it is of Bonnie. The achievement icons all feature Popgoes as well, suggesting that Fritz is telling him to bring Bonnie back. This would explain why, when Popgoes was saving Bonnie's spirit in the arcade, saving Bonnie is a directive instead of an objective. Again, a directive is an instruction from an authoritative person, in this case Fritz. He's the owner of the Popgoes Pizzeria, so him telling Popgoes to save Bonnie becomes his directive. And we know that this doesn't just apply to the arcade. Both the soundtrack and teaser of Popgoes printing the Black Rabbit are called directive. This obviously means that he's following that command in Evergreen. However, Popgoes misinterprets bringing Bonnie back as printing out a giant toy Bonnie figurine, which is black because it's not painted. In Arcade's ending, Bonnie says that she needs to find something else, obviously hinting at her possessing the Black Rabbit. I mean, she's literally saying that while appearing as a Black Rabbit sprite, and her jump scare is in the form of the Black Rabbit. So it seems like she learned about Popgoes' printing job and controls other bots to ensure that he succeeds. This is pretty much what happened in the 2016 lore as well, so I think I got that right. So clearly, Bonnie's trying to get a physical body. But what's her end goal? The only clue we have is that in Popgoes Arcade, Bonnie is very focused on Happiest Day. One of her overworld sprites says, "Trapped, where's Happiest Day?" And in the ending, she's found in the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3. This is where Simon's victims were put to rest, so likely, she's also trying to be set free. Now, how that happens is a little vague. It's possible that she has to eliminate her killer, that being her father. It's not confirmed that a soul gets their happiest day after their killer dies, but both the Freddy's and Candy's storylines end with their respective killers perishing. However, Simon's victims were put to rest before his death, so maybe the demise of one's killer isn't a necessity for their happiest day. In the ending of Popgoes and the Machinist, the titular Weasel kills Morse the Mole, further hinting that Bonnie might kill her father. I'm not entirely confident in this theory, so we'll just have to wait and see how things play out. Moving on from Bonnie Glade, let's focus on Evergreen's other villain, Simon. As I discussed earlier, in the original lore, this purple skeleton was created by Fritz Glade in the image of his brother, who is of course the Purple Man. However, I don't think this will be the case in the CPU. If you recall, before Bonnie's death, she created the Violet Project with Marilyn. It was supposed to combine all the information surrounding Freddy's, Candy's, and the paranormal in general to see if they could connect any dots. This might sound like a stretch at first, but what if the Violet Project was the artificial intelligence program created to connect all this data? In the 2016 lore, Fritz made something for strings called a Curiosity Module, which was similarly designed to connect pieces of evidence. I believe this concept might have gotten reused in the CPU for the Violet Project. But this time, it's Bonnie and Marilyn creating an AI to tie information together, and the AI is none other than Simon. Again, just bear with me here because I know this sounds crazy, but so much implies that this is the case. Remember when we were discussing the character gift boxes, Simon's was violet. Not purple, but specifically violet, like the Violet Project. Also, the Purple Man is a perfect form for an AI fed on the information of Freddy's and the supernatural. Adding to this, Popgoes Arcade strongly implies that Fritz didn't make Simon. As I mentioned earlier, all the variants of Freddy seem to be representations of Simon. And interestingly enough, the Mangle, who symbolizes Robot Simon, isn't created by the Machinist. Pretty much all of his robots are parallels to Fritz's real animatronics. So having the Mangle not be created by him seems to be a very intentional detail to imply that Fritz doesn't make Simon in the CPU. Additionally, the Mangle might hint that Simon Fitzgerald's spirit will possess Simon, since King Freddy haunts the Mangle. I still stand by what I said about Springtrapped dying in FNAF 3, but I thought I'd at least entertain this idea. It's possible that Springtrapped's remains were auctioned off after the Fazbear's Fright Fire, and Bonnie, for some reason, used this while creating Simon, allowing the ghost of Simon Fitzgerald to possess the Violet Project. However, Arcade's story isn't always one for one. I think it's more likely that this represents how Robot Simon carries on Simon Fitzgerald's mission, as both of them have a desire to evolve. So while Simon is dead, his ideals and evil live on through his robot doppelganger. Again, Simon surviving FNAF 3 would be a drastic change, but it's a possibility that I thought I should at least address. The Death as an Animal Simon voice is very robotic, and the mangle is literally haunted by dead King Freddy, unlike how the other robots are simple replicas. So that could imply that Robo Simon is haunted by Human Simon. I'm much more confident that Simon is the embodiment of the Violet Project, an AI program created by Bonnie in an attempt to make some sense of all the timeline's supernatural events. However, it seems like his learning function might have spiraled out of control, causing him to want to evolve. This is implied by the Violet Box, which conveys a desire to become smarter and stronger. The box also seems to imply that Simon's anger stems from abandonment, possibly referring to how his creator, Bonnie, was murdered. He might not know that she's dead, instead believing that she abandoned him, and this leads to his rage. However, this could also refer to how Simon Fitzgerald's father passed. Furthermore, it looks like Fritz has Simon locked up in his office, just like in the 2016 story. The Simon and Evergreen April Fool's Day video briefly shows his new design closing the office door. And while this is a silly joke video, it might imply that it's still where he resides in the Popgoes Pizzeria. It's possible that after Bonnie's death, Fritz, realizing Simon's dangerous potential, locked him up in his office. He'll probably try to escape in Evergreen, maybe by deceiving the protagonist like in the original game. I'm not 100% confident in everything I said here, but I believe I'm at least somewhat close. I'm pretty sure that Simon is the Violet Project. On to someone of lesser importance, Menorah the Mouse. Again, she and Holly don't have animatronic variants in the Popgoes Pizzeria. However, in the 2016 lore, Menorah almost did, but she was scrapped and left in a secret room. In Arcade, when you battle Morse, he summons a prototype Menorah, which reminds me a lot of this old storyline. While this might simply be a fun reference, the implication that Morse's robots are meant to parallel the Popgoes animatronics might hint that in Evergreen or its sequel, we'll end up discovering an unfinished Menorah animatronic. A Menorah model was made as a fun milestone goal for one of Daco's charity streams, and the Popgoes Twitter reiterated that she's not an Evergreen as a robot threat. But I still think there could be some sort of unfinished form in this game or another, because that prototype Menorah in Arcade is really suspicious. Moving past the Popgoes Pizzeria, let's take a look at the post-night gameplay. These take place in colored vaults that connect to each Popgoes character and their toy counterpart, who serves as the main threat in each level. As the animatronic gets closer to you, it'll transition to a more demented look, which is referred to as False. False Freddy and Balloon Boy have already been revealed, along with some glimpses of False Mangle. In terms of story, I believe this represents Fritz's fears for the toy animatronics, and will be playing as him during these sections. The vault naming convention implies that these are vaults in his mind where he's locked away the fears of the toys, and now he has to face them. Speaking of the Freddy's gang, I want to mention that Popgoes' hat might have some story significance. If you remember, this is actually Freddy Fazbear's hat that Fritz won from the Fazbear's Fright auction. In Bonnie's diary, she noted that her father seemed to believe that Freddy Fazbear or the pizzeria itself was unlucky, and this might have more meaning than it seems. In Popgoes 2016, luck was a very real thing, with the Fitzgerald brothers both being on the opposite sides of the luck spectrum. Jeremy/Fritz was the unluckiest man in the world, while Simon was lucky, albeit his luck eventually turned on him. So perhaps luck is still part of the modern story, and Fritz giving Freddy's hat to Popgoes the Weasel transferred some of the bad luck surrounding Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to the Popgoes Pizzeria. Speaking of Freddy, the Death as an Animal teaser ends with a look at a super withered Freddy. Considering that he doesn't yet resemble his classic appearance, it seems that this is before the withers were refurbished. So perhaps during Evergreen, there will be a flashback between FNAF 2 and 1, possibly featuring Simon doing experiments with the haunted animatronic's blood so he can learn how to tame death. This game looks like it will take place all across the timeline. There have been teasers of the original Freddy's, the FNAF 2 location, Saffron's construction, and a Simon's abandoned house. Judging from how both the Freddy's teaser in MyPOPGOES and the Death as an Animal teaser are recordings, Evergreen might feature footage depicting crucial events throughout Fritz's life. As we said before, Death as an Animal is very reminiscent of the Red Bunker memory from the cancelled Popgoes Finale, in which Fritz explored Simon's abandoned hideout. The rest of the game would have similarly depicted memories throughout Fritz's life at various Freddy's locations, which feels like what all of these teasers are building up to. Maybe in Evergreen, we'll experience his memories. From his love for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, to uncovering his brother's despicable work, to creating the Popgoes Pizzeria in the present day, and who knows what else. That's all we have to say about Popgoes Evergreen at the moment. This is a game we're very excited for. I can't wait to see how it continues the story and enhances the gameplay of the original Popgoes.
POPGOES.
But Evergreen isn't the only upcoming game in the CPU. Five Nights at Candy's 4 is also on the way. We made a video discussing the troubled development of this 4th entry and the series as a whole, if you're interested in a more in-depth look. But what we know in terms of story is that this game won't really be part of the Candy's trilogy. It doesn't focus on Mary or her family, and the rat won't even be the main villain. Instead, this entry will take a look at the Robotics Corporation, which you may recall produced the rat and cat wire puppets and all of the Candy's bots. This game takes place in some sort of facility, likely the robotics factory or another one of their establishments. Our main character for this entry is expected to follow a series of jobs without question, and most importantly, not activate the animatronics. For this game, Candy the Cat is finally the main antagonist, with a new variant known as Forgotten Candy. He's been all over the teasers, and even appeared in one of the FNaC remastered endings, as a man talks about making the cat perfect. We know that at least some portion of the story takes place before the events of Five Nights at Candy's 1, as evidenced by the Forgotten Candy poster on Cam 13. Interestingly, you can also see the newspaper reporting the twins' death behind it, which could indicate that Forgotten Candy was made after that event, or it could just be a reused asset. Along with this new candy, there's another cat character, some candylings, and a whole unknown cast of both animatronic and human characters. Emil Mako mentioned that there's going to be entirely new bots, rather than just new variants of previous characters. That's pretty much all I know about the story at this moment. Since there wasn't much to discuss with Five Nights at Candy's 4, let's poke some fun at this series and point out all the plot holes that we caught. This isn't us trying to be mean or anything, it's just fun to analyze minor mistakes in this otherwise amazing story. First off, in the FNaC 3 minigame depicting Rat murdering the Candy's guard in 1993, Chester and Old Candy appear, which messes with the timeline a lot. Old Candy is decommissioned at this point, and Chester's at the robotics factory, so their presence here doesn't make too much sense. And before anyone says that the guard here is the one before Mary who attacked Blank, it's clearly not. As Five Nights at Candy's 2 shows us, whenever the rat kills people, he leaves them out in the open. He left the 1993 Candy's guard in the office, and if the rat or cat kills Marilyn in FNaC 2, then a newspaper reports that her body is found. Unlike when the Candy's characters get her, she's simply declared missing. Since the guard who attacked Blank wasn't found dead, it's unlikely that Rat killed him. This means this minigame has to depict the rodent killing the guard in 1993, so it doesn't make sense how Old Candy and Chester are here, given how Old Candy should be dead, and Chester should be chilling at the robotics factory. On the subject of the factory, the Five Nights at Candy's 2 ending newspaper says that 6 people died there, but it should be 7 considering someone else died there in 1993. The 6 previous victims all correlate to the 6 Candy's animatronics, so there weren't 5 victims before the other person died there in 1993. Another weird thing in FNaC 2 is how the original Vinny appears in the office during Chester's minigame. I mentioned how strange this was earlier, but seriously, I can't tell if this is meant to imply that the puppeteer's ghost resides in Candy's burgers and fries, or if it's just an Easter egg. I think the latter is more likely, but it is so weird. On a more positive note, Emil Mako stated that the changes made to the Candy's trilogy and the DX Steam releases will hopefully make the first 3 games feel like coherent pieces of the series they belong in. So these plot holes and Vinny's random appearance might get cleaned up. And with that, we've reached the end of this video. This has been a long project that's been in the works for quite some time, so it means a lot that you stuck around to the very end. As a thanks, please enjoy this very special outro of Blake and I making Popgoes and the Black Rabbit dance around. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and join our Patreon and YouTube memberships. Special thanks to our current members listed on screen, we appreciate your support. Please consider becoming a member yourself. It helps us continue making videos like this one, and both memberships have a range of cool perks such as shoutouts, early access to ad-free videos, custom emojis, badges next to your name, exclusive previews of upcoming projects, and more. Thanks for watching and sticking around till the very end, and be sure to check out our other videos.